And now a lot of the thinking I'm doing is I read for the Marshall Memo each week. Every Sunday I sit down and read through what's come into my mailbox during the week, which is many publications that I subscribe to, and then writing on Monday and trying to stay. This is an issue I've really keep coming back to because it's one that bugged me as a teacher, that puzzled me as a principal, and it now fascinates me as sort of an aggregator and curator of research. So I got some slides here. I want to charge through them, and I want to also give you some time to think at certain points. So we'll signal those. It's going to be a little bit of a lecture, I'm afraid, but I hope this sort of, it's usually a 3-hour presentation. I've cut this down to 1 hour. So we can take a look at this. Okay, so here's sort of the basic question is do we need to rethink differentiation? And I want to show you a picture here of the perfect differentiation. So here's a marital bed. In this situation, it's easy to differentiate because you can put a blanket on one side of equal differentiation. Pretty easy one, actually. So what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about why do this in the first place. Why is it so daunting, especially for teachers? Some history, what the research debate is saying, and I'm going to suggest a new way of thinking about this. So here we go. So what's the problem to which differentiation is the answer? Or is the solution? So you got all these kids, between 20 and 30 kids in a classroom, sometimes more. My daughter is the 7th grade teacher in Boston. She often has 35 kids in her classroom. So you got kids at different levels of vocabulary knowledge, general knowledge, reading levels are all over the place, even in a tract situation. You got English fluency issues, you got values issues and attitude towards schools. Some kids come in with what my kids in Boston used to call a attitude. You got mindsets about learning, fixed versus growth mindset. You got special needs. You got things on their minds, for example, puberty. You got learning styles. And then you got different strengths on Howard Gardner's 8 intelligences. So this is a pretty daunting challenge. And this goes back to the days of the one-room schoolhouse, where a woman, this is an actual photo, was taking care of kids all the way from not much more than toddlers up to beards. So this, imagine the differentiation that had to take place in that. And I want to show you an even more extreme example here. This is a segregated school in the South. And look at that. Just look at the differentiation challenge there. So over the years, we came from the one-room schoolhouse to grouping kids, making more homogeneous age, by ability levels, robins, redbirds, and vultures, by achievement, gifted classes. These are ways of trying to make the challenge of all the diversity in the classroom easier for the teacher. Never easy, but easier by these groupings, IEP accommodations, and even selective schools. So, I mean, here's an all-male class. That's one theory. Together, it'll be easier for the teacher. An all-female class is a private school there. And so these are all ways, again, of grappling with this issue of so much diversity in the classroom. However, even in one of those all-male classes, there's a lot of differences. And so even in what seems like a homogeneous class, track class and so on, we got somebody who wants to turn their mute there. So every class has variation. And if you try to teach just to the middle, that's going to be inefficient. If they all get the same 25 spelling words, if the whole class is reading Romeo and Juliet together, you're going to have a problem. And then, of course, lecturing is a problem. I don't know how many of you have seen this scene in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. This Ben Stein was playing this teacher who's just lecturing and answering his own questions, and the kids are just sort of catatonic. So it would seem that effective, skillful, equitable differentiation is a moral imperative because you got to reach all those kids. So you got to somehow customize teaching to meet individual needs. You've got to get all kids engaged. You got to push the curve. And here's, there's always variation. Okay, so you're going to have variation, but you want to push it to the right. You want it to be more like the purple curve than the red curve, so that all kids are at a basic level of achievement. You want to narrow that achievement gap. So here's Carolyn Tomlinson. Probably most of you have read Carolyn Tomlinson over the years. She is one of the gurus. So let me just read this quote and emphasize some key words here. So differentiation is effective attention to the learning needs of each student. The purpose of developing a differentiated classroom is to make sure that there's an opportunity and support for each student to learn essential knowledge and skills as effectively and efficiently as possible. The key is getting to know each student and orchestrating the learning environment, curriculum, assessments, and instruction so all students learn what's being taught. So that is, the guru of differentiation, really putting on the table what it is that ideally should be happening in a differentiated classroom. And it's pretty daunting. So she takes it a step further, that a good teacher should differentiate by content, that is, giving the content that's appropriate for each student, which is going to be different, process, by how students learn, and product is what they actually do, a test or a demonstration of learning of some kind. So that formulation, I think, is where a lot of teachers hit the wall. It's just, oh my gosh, you're asking me to differentiate by content, process, and product. And that really means customizing instruction for each student's strengths. I mean, this is really daunting. Okay, so there's been pushback. And I followed this very closely over the years. So these are the major concerns that have been raised about differentiation. First of all, the workload. You're up all night trying to differentiate for all these kids. Is it manageable? So then do groups not working with a teacher? For example, if you've grouped your class into 3 or 4 groups, the teacher can only be with one, are the others doing worthless worksheets and coloring and stuff like that? Are they doing useful, or are they spinning their wheels? Do you, when you differentiate, then implicitly lower the expectations for the kids who are behind, which will widen the achievement gap? Will kids start noticing who's smart and who isn't smart? Kids are pretty good at noticing that, right? Who's ahead and who's getting the challenging work and so forth. Will kids think it's unfair that some kids get these easy worksheets? Does it spoon feed students and make them dependent, so when they get to college and the workplace, they're not independent workers and learners? If students get to choose content, will they choose wisely? There's another thing. If you give them a lot of choice, does it balkanize the classroom? Does it break the classroom up into these these little sort of groups so that there isn't this cohesive thing? Oh, and the most important question of all, what does the research say? Does the research say that this works? So here's Mike Schmoker. Many of you probably read some of Mike Schmoker's work over the years. He said in a scathing 2010 Education Week article that differentiation is based largely on enthusiasm and a certain superficial logic. And I'll let you read the rest of this quote from this article.
Hey, Kim, it's Jackie. I think while they're reading that, I just wanted to let you know that as you switch slides, it slows down your speech too. The technology slows your speech. So you kind of go through this like slow-mo words. So you may just want to click the slide and then start up because technology is slowing your own speech down.
Wow, thank you very much for that little bit of real-time feedback.
Think about Zoom these days.
Okay, so this is a pretty darn scathing indictment by Mike Schmoker, and it got a lot of attention. So of course, Tomlinson wrote back in Education Week, accompanied by David Sousa, and she actually acknowledged that these kinds of activities, these coloring activities that Schmoker was dinging, were regrettable and damaging. Those were her words. So she admitted that that was not what she meant by differentiation. She didn't want teachers to do that. She also agreed on the importance of clear objectives, high standards, frequent checks for understanding. So they were together on that one. But she and Sousa defended a differentiation's track record. They said there is evidence, and they pointed to some of this research and so forth. So they're going back and forth. So then Danny Willing, who's a person I respect a lot, actually at the same university as Carolyn Tomlinson. So he jumps in and he says, the real thing is not the kids' learning styles, it's what you're teaching. So for example, if you're teaching atomic structure or a molecule, then you should probably use, marshmallows and toothpicks. If you're teaching the solar system, you should probably use, a model. If you're teaching the Battle of Gettysburg, you should probably use a movie, and so forth. So he said, all students learn more when content drives the choice of modality. Very interesting point. We're taking teachers in a very different direction. So here are two other gurus. John Hattie, who wrote a book called Visible Learning. He ranked educational things in the classroom from the most effective to the least effective. And he had 138 on his list at one point. And individualization, he ranked 100th out of 138 and with an effect size of 0.23, very low. And John Safir, another guru, a man I respect very much, says differentiation is a low impact strategy that's not the best target for PD if other fundamentals aren't in place. So more criticism, more criticism. So what the heck is the teacher to do? What's a principal to do? What do you look for in a classroom? Clearly, you can't customize for every student. There will be variation. But can we reduce variation? Can we maximize learning for all students? I don't know if you're familiar with the Matthew effect. It comes from the Bible. Matthew 13:12 says, "For those who have much, much will be given, and they will have an abundance. From those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away." In other words, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And so what you have in a classroom that isn't differentiated, it would seem, is the rich getting richer, the kids who come in with advantages get further ahead, and the kids who walk in with disadvantages. And so that's the challenge. And the real challenge is how can teachers not burn themselves out, and how can principals know what to look for in classrooms? So I want to do a little exercise here, and we'll have time for discussion right at the end of this. This brief, I'm going to show you 20 instructional scenarios. A classroom or museum or physical education scenarios. And I want you, as you look at these, and I'll give you a slide with all 20 at the end, to ask yourself which 4 or 5 is there the most differentiation going on, and in which 4 or 5 is the teaching the least differentiated? So the most differentiated, the least differentiated. So here we go. So the first one is the professor lecturing to 700 people. Second one, having a discussion about bullying. They pushed the chairs, desks aside, and they got in a circle, and the teacher's leading a discussion on bullying. Third scenario, now they've gone outside. You notice the teacher is standing to the side there by the tree, and they're having a discussion and a trust exercise. So now we have 4 kids doing a hands-on science experiment. So we have strategic cold calling. I have a video of this, which we don't have time to play, but I'll just tell you briefly what this teacher does. This is a charter school in Newark, New Jersey. He throws questions at kids, seemingly at random, okay? And they're all standing there. They stand up when they do this cold calling. But as you watch the video, you notice that he gives harder questions to some kids than others. So there's sort of a subtle differentiation going on there. So here these kids have chosen their own books and they're reading. So here is a math lesson for 4th graders. And here's what the teacher did. So they're trying to do equivalent fractions. And so the question is, Jamie has 24 shirts in a closet. Red, 1/3 of them are yellow. 12 of them are green, the rest are blue. How many shirts are blue? And the kids get in groups and they try to figure out a strategy. And the class discusses what's the best and what's the most efficient way of solving this problem. So kids are watching a movie. Number 9, this is Newsella. I don't know how many of you are using Newsella. It's an amazing website that takes a news article. For example, there might be this article was about U.S.-Chinese presidents' joint climate change initiative. And by pulling that toggle on the right-hand side there, the teacher can adjust the difficulty level of the text. So it can go from very easy to, like high school level. And so you can toggle up and down the same content, but at different levels of readability. So this is a teacher in California, Leah Alcala, who at the beginning of every period puts up a problem, and this is the problem you see up there, and she has the kids solve it on an index card. She quickly collects the index cards, sorts through them in front of the class, and chooses her favorite wrong answer. She calls it my favorite no. She projects it without the student's name, and then she asks the kids, what did the student do right, and what did the student do wrong? Does this at the beginning of every class. So here's a computer lab with an adaptive program. So if you get it right, you get a harder problem. If you get it wrong, you get an easier problem. Here's a phys ed class. There's about 50 kids here, all doing jumping jacks together with the teacher. Art class, teachers walking around, watching the kids, commenting on their creations here. Music class. Now, this is a class, a high school group of kids that's going to a museum, and the docent is explaining a picture to them. Layered curriculum. I'd never heard of this until I went to Arlington High School in Massachusetts and saw it in action in a chemistry class. So the students have a basic level of work, and if they do that work and get it okay, they get a C. If they do that work and a little bit more, okay, manipulate, knowledge, problem solve, and brainstorm, then they get a B. And if they do all that and then they do another layer, complex critical thinking, then they can earn an A. So it's up to the kids to decide how much, what level of difficulty their work and what grade they're going to get. So you're probably all familiar with Salman Khan. The Khan Academy website is getting a tremendous amount of business these days. It's not, although business is the wrong word because it's free. So the flipped classroom, the idea is they watch the instructional video at home and they can watch it 10 times if they want to until they get it. And then in class, class is much more interactive as the teacher works with the classmates. This is a kind of a spoofy cartoon here, but the idea is, you know, kids take a number, they come up and they get individual help from the teacher. And then Teach to One, a program in New York City for math where the kids every day after instruction, they take a quick quiz. The quiz is computer scored overnight, and then the next day they walk in and they look at what looks like an airline schedule, and it tells them where they're going to go in which period of the day based upon their performance in the previous day. So it's all customized based on how they did on the quiz at the end of the day. And then finally, our last one is one-on-one tutoring. So here we go, absolutely one-on-one instruction. So the question is, what are the most differentiated and which are the least differentiated? And here are all 20 pictures. So can you just cogitate yourself? If you're with anyone else, think about this with them and just jot down, what do you think are the most differentiated and the least differentiated? Go ahead and think about that for a minute, and then we'll hear from you. So kind of jot down the the 4 or so that you think are the most differentiated, and the 4 or so that you think are the least differentiated. Okay, so Jackie, how do you want to handle this? By the chat, or do people want to unmute and just and say how they want to what their opinions are on this?
Hi, Kim. It's Greg Brown. So I'm just stepping in for Jackie for a couple moments.
Great.
I do have a recommendation. If everybody were to click on the participant tab at the bottom of their screen, you're going to see a window open up. And in that window, you have the ability to click on a button that says raise hand. So since we have like 25 people here, Kim, it might make sense if we just have people press the button, and then I can just ask them to unmute their mic as they raise their hand. What do you think?
Terrific. Oh, please. That sounds great.
So if you wouldn't mind just posing the question again, and then I'll monitor.
Okay. Well, let's start with the most differentiated. What do you think are the most differentiated of these 20 scenarios?
Alberta you had your hand up. You want to unmute your mic and share?
Sure. I was just going to say that the most differentiated is going to be the more one-to-one. And I also included the backwards classroom design because then kids will be able to get the knowledge that they need up front and go into the class with their questions.
Now, which is the backwards design one? Which one are you thinking of?
The Khan Academy one.
Ah, okay. Yeah, great. Okay. While I've got you, how about what do you think are the least differentiated?
Well, the 700 student lecture. And just more with the larger classroom settings.
Oh, so the gym class, probably the physics
class? Exactly.
Okay. So thank you. Anyone else have some different votes for the most differentiated and the least differentiated?
Evelyn, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, everyone. I'm with Byram Hills Central School District in Westchester County, New York. I've never seen the 2-to-1 model. I think it's fantastic. It allows the student to self-evaluate and then be able to get the support or enhancement they may need for their subject. It's terrific.
Okay, and how about the least differentiated?
I agree with my colleague, the 700 lecture of which I've been part of more than once in my education leaves you hanging if you're not really sure. If you lose the thread, you just become a body there, just hearing and not really listening.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. Maybe one more, if you have different opinions on some of these. So if we don't have hands up.
We've got one more. Kim,
Oh, one more. Go ahead.
Yep, Patty's hand just went up. Go ahead, Patty.
Hi, my name is Patty O'Rourke. I teach at Haldane. I go between the middle school and high school. I really liked the most differentiated was my favorite no.
Uh-huh.
I've been in 7th and 8th grade math, and I know typically, you kind of come in, there's a do now, we go through the homework, and we concentrate on these are the steps to get it right. But then when I sometimes do the pullout, it's interesting, you do learn more of the student who's kind of either missed a step, right? So much of math is multi-step. And I feel like probably the co-teach class that I'm in, I wrote that down. I would absolutely do that. I think it's a great differential because I think most of the kids are missing steps in the multi-step. And I think you do learn more from when you get it wrong. Figure out kind of how to not miss that.
That video, my favorite no, you can put it on YouTube or on the teaching channel. It's a wonderful sort of 10-minute video in which Leah sort of walks through this process in a real class. It's a wonderful video. And I agree with you that the potential there for differentiation, for catching mistakes and getting kids to think about their thinking is just so powerful. So what are your votes for the least differentiated?
I also agree with my colleague, the 700 person lecture and probably just watching a movie.
Yeah. Okay, great. So why don't we move on? I hear what you're saying. And again, if you go into a classroom or an auditorium or a gym with that question, what's the most differentiated? I think we can probably have more of a discussion, but definitely you can see which way you go. So now I have a different question, which is, in which scenarios do you think the students are learning the most? So the focus here is on learning. So let's go back to all these pictures here, and let's think about this. And you can see that it's coming in with a different orientation. And I would argue that lecture, the top left-hand slide there, which is, by the way, Michael Sandel in Sanders Theater at Harvard, teaching his course on justice. And I've sat in on that class, and he is an unbelievably charismatic and wonderful teacher. And every one of those 700 kids, Harvard students, are leaning forward and are highly involved. So that's one extreme of 700 kids where you've got a lot of learning going on. And then let's go to the other extreme, the bottom right-hand corner there, the one-on-one tutoring. How could that not be effective in terms of learning? Like what are some conditions that even in a one-on-one situation could make that ineffective in terms of student learning? Does somebody want to chime in on that? So Greg, are we getting any hands raised there?
Hi, Kim. I'm back actually, and we do have a couple of hands raised. It looks like we have Patty. Patty, you are unmuted or not?
Sure.
Okay, there we go.
I do some one-on-one tutoring, and I'm thinking, Kim, that perhaps maybe sometimes when you do sit down on one-on-one, I know for me personally, it's like I have an agenda of content that I need to kind of get, World War I into this student's brain for the test, tomorrow. And I
Uh-huh.
wonder whether or not sometimes in that goal or that teaching kind of objective, am I really kind of assessing and saying, okay, what do you know? What don't you know? What are you struggling with? What's the vocabulary that you don't understand? And I
Mm.
sometimes feel like it's me just taking a download of my brain into theirs.
Huh. Wow, you are a very self-critical tutor. I'm sure you're a wonderful tutor, but you're being very very self-critical there. So let's go even more extreme there. Let's say the tutor was mean. Let's say the tutor wasn't listening to the kid at all. Let's say the tutor was on the wrong curriculum. I mean, so just my point is that at the two extremes there, you can have very effective learning going on even in a large group, and you can have very ineffective learning going on with a small group. And we could take these one at a time and really see how in every situation you could have good learning going on. Okay. Even the movie. I mean, the movie, okay, they're sitting there passively, but what if the teacher had posed a whole lot of really provocative questions and they were watching it like a treasure hunt? And even the phys ed class, I will stand up for the phys ed teachers here. Even the phys ed class, you could argue that kids who have obesity issues or who have other issues or ADHD issues can disproportionately benefit from a simple uniform exercise like jumping jacks. So you can, that's stretching it a little bit. And the Salcon thing, that could be mishandled. So you got my point. So when you start asking that question, rather than is it differentiated, when you look at learning, all of a sudden you're coming into a classroom with a different lens, or you're preparing for a classroom as a teacher with a different lens. So what are the variables? The variables are teacher skill, teacher training, teacher sensitivity, and above all, the appropriate stuff for the kids and the content that's there. So I have a better question to ask. Rather than is it differentiated by content, process, and product, here are the questions. And Rick Dufour is the person behind these. What are the students supposed to be learning in this class? Are these learning experiences the best learning experiences? For example, is the movie, or the jumping jacks, the science experiment, are these the best experiences for the kids to learn what they're supposed to be learning? And the third question, of course, is, are they all learning it? So this is coming into a classroom as an administrator, or this is planning for a classroom as a teacher with a somewhat different orientation. What are they supposed to be learning? Are these experiences that they're having, whether it's a lecture, whether it's a movie, whether it's an experiment, whether it's a hands-on experience, is this the best way to teach what they're supposed to be learning, and are they learning it? So I think these questions are better because they focus teachers and supervisors on several things. First of all, the appropriate cognitive and non-cognitive goals for the year, the unit, and the lesson. Okay, how's this fit in? A clear standard of mastery, like the question, are they learning it? Usually 80% is sort of the standard of mastery. Getting to know the students, you got to know the kids to know how they're doing. Orchestrating the best learning experiences. Deciding, is this the time for a whole class experience? Is this the time for small groups, time for individual, or is it time for them to be on a computer? What's the mode of learning that's the best for what I'm trying to teach? Of course, checking for understanding. Come back to that in a minute. Using assessments to fix problems and fine-tune teaching in real time. And then, because nothing is ever perfect, following up with the kids who aren't yet successful. So that's what I think you get out of this. So does this make sense, what I've done so far, which is really to critique the traditional model of differentiation, look at a bunch of situations, and then put forward a different model, a different way of looking at it. So let's just pause here. And maybe the best way is sort of hand raise, because we can't get into groups. I haven't figured that out on Zoom yet. We can do groups, but I haven't figured it out yet. So let's just have some hands raised of what's your reaction so far, because we're only about halfway through here.
Thanks, Kim. And we can definitely do some breakout rooms, but I do have a couple of hands. So if you want, I'll just unmute that hand of Jen Gens here first, and we can take it away.
I agree totally with what you were talking about. And I think that really, I've sat in on amazing lectures, and and on horrible one-to-one teaching opportunities. And so I do agree that it's really the effectiveness of the teacher and the choice of materials and content that they're teaching. So I also think that frees up teachers. I work with teachers in various schools and districts and helping them improve their outcomes for students with disabilities. And I think it makes it easier for them. It doesn't seem as daunting that every student, there needs to be a differentiated plan for every minute of the day. It really is looking at it in a more global way and saying, am I doing the right kind of instruction for this particular lesson, and am I setting the goals appropriately? So I think it would be less overwhelming to the teachers to think about it in this way.
Yeah, amen to that. And you've said it better than I did. Thank you. Other comments, and you don't have to agree. We want to get some discussion going here.
That looks like all the hands I had right now, Kim.
Okay. Now, Jackie, do you know how to do a breakout room? Because this is something that was actually on my list, but I didn't get to it.
Absolutely, I could do that. Would you like to do that?
Sure. Yeah. Let's just take a few minutes.
All right. So how the breakout rooms work is we put you into breakout rooms. It does it automatically. It just puts a bunch of you in a different room. And with your small group, you'll have your discussion. When you'll get a little message that says to join. Once I click to go into the breakout rooms, it'll say join. You have to click join and it'll take you to the meeting room. And then when I close the rooms, it gives you about 60 seconds to wrap up your conversation and leave the room and come back. At 60 seconds, the room will close immediately.
And will they be able to see each other?
They will. They'll be able to see each other just like this, only in a gallery view. Hopefully their setting will allow for that.
Terrific. Okay, so the discussion question is, does this make sense so far, or do you disagree? And in particular, thinking of it through two lenses. First of all, for the teacher preparing a lesson, and then for an administrator or principal observing a lesson. Does this way of thinking about it resonate with you or not? And go ahead and have a quick discussion, just a couple of minutes to do this.
All right. Okay, our breakout rooms have officially closed, Kim, so you can go ahead and start sharing your screen. Folks are piling in.
Great. Okay, so again, if we were together, we would now be able to hear back from the groups. I was part of one group, heard some thoughtful comments from 4 different people. So let's move on, because I'm also looking at my. So again, that's the first shift. And I may not have persuaded everybody, but first shift is focusing less on differentiation and more on whether students are learning the right stuff through the best possible learning experiences. So I want to talk now about a second shift, which is moving from differentiating by content, process, and product, which I think is intellectually interesting, but operationally difficult, shifting from that to focusing on the 3 logical phases of teaching, which are unit and lesson planning, so getting ready to teach, delivery of instruction, actual teaching, and then following up with unsuccessful students. So those to me are from the practical teacher point of view, and also from the administrator's point of view, those to me, I think, are the 3 logical steps. So let's take the first one first, unit and lesson planning. So this teacher now, she's on a break, or maybe it's in the late afternoon, she's planning. So she's planning her units and her lessons. And I think the first thing, and I'm a big advocate of the Wiggins-McTighe backwards design, understanding about design unit plan. The unit plan is the bigger picture, the 5-week unit on poetry, the 6-week unit on quadratic equations. And the key thing with a good unit plan is clarity on what the students will know and be able to do, anticipating likely misconceptions and errors, enduring understandings, the big ideas and the essential questions, and then a lesson-by-lesson game plan, lots of assessment, and in a really good unit plan, a hook to grab kids at the very beginning, the first lesson. So that's a good unit plan. And this is a sort of an overall graphic. If you start at the bottom there are the sort of the standards, in New York, very robust, Regents-oriented standards, Common Core. So if we just took 6th grade, then the 6th grade teacher should have a very clear idea of what the kids should know and be able to do by the end of 6th grade. That's that box there, grade 6 learning expectations. And then the year is broken up into units. We're moving up now, so number sense, multiplication, division, measurement, graphing, et cetera, fractions. And then there's the unit plan, and then there's the individual lesson. So each lesson should be part of a good unit plan, which is part of a game plan, which is part of driving toward these end of the year expectations, and then as part of the school district's overall plan to get kids ready for college and career success. So the unit plan is that second from the top one there. So then there's the lesson plan. And I'm sure you've all been familiar with Universal Design for Learning, UDL, which is a really great concept that came out of curb cuts. So when they first did curb cuts for people in wheelchairs, it's great for people in wheelchairs to not have to bump over the curb and fall on their face. But it turns out the curb cut, the same curb cut that's made for a special population, is also helpful for people with strollers, rolling suitcases, bicycles, food carts, delivery dollies, and wheelbarrows. So all these people benefit from something that's designed for a specific population. And the concept in a lesson plan is, how can you design your lesson plan so it's more like a buffet than a single serving of dinner? So it's something that makes all kids successful rather than just a few kids.
Kim,
And
would
so,
you please share your screen again? I think it's not showing up on the.
oh my gosh, not showing up. Oh,
No,
hold on. So what did I not do here?
That's all right. When we come in and out of the breakout rooms, your screen stops sharing. So you have to put it back up.
So I need to share here. Sign in to share your presentation. Wait a minute. Hold it. Gosh. Okay. Now that's not right. What did I? So somehow here I lost the share button. So where do I click for share?
Share should be on your screen at the very bottom. There's a little green button.
I got it. Okay, I got it. Okay, thank you very much, Jackie. Thank you. Okay, now where is my presentation? I'm not seeing my presentation.
It may be in one of your icons, but how about this? How about I share my screen since I have it up? Will that help? Oh, there you go.
So are you seeing? You're seeing it now?
Yes, we see all your slides. There you are. UDL.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you seeing this slide for lesson planning?
For lesson planning, yes, a helpful concept.
Okay, good. With a wheelchair?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so sorry. Okay, so here we get back to the concept of the universal design for learning, is this idea of a lesson plan that is not just so one-dimensional. So what a good UDL lesson plan does is front load success. And so there are different ways of presenting material, engaging the students and so forth, clear goals, links to the student, using the best modality. Again, is this a time for a lecture? Is it a time for independent reading? Is it a time for a video, photos, internet, hands-on, etc.? And of course, making accommodations and good checks for understanding. So then there is a question of visuals, and this is part of good lesson preparation, is having stuff on the walls that helps get across lessons. And I just have a few photos here. Here is a class in high school in the Bronx, in New York City Public School in the Bronx that I took a few years ago. This teacher at the back of her room had a big bulletin board, and she put up all the units for the year. So the first unit is scientific method. There's the key vocabulary. The second is the cell. The third is homeostasis. And you can't see all the others, but there are 8 units in the year. And this is a great way of giving kids the big picture. Where are we going? What are we doing? And what's the key vocabulary? I love to see essential questions. This is a high school in Queens, up by Junction Boulevard. Every single classroom in this New York City public school has good essential questions for the unit that they're currently teaching. So this is a unit on King Lear. And if you know the play King Lear, these are wonderful essential questions to get at some of the key sort of big ideas of that. There's an elementary classroom with reading strategies. These visuals on the wall really help to ramp up all kids' success. That's the key thing with the visuals here. So look at the picture, get your mouth sounded applied to the words. In Maine, district in Maine, where they had accountable talk prompts on the wall. I feel the same way because I used to think that way. I disagree with you because those things. How to grow as a mathematician. And in the classrooms, I'm always so moved when I'm in classrooms, and I'm in classrooms a lot, just seeing what teachers have on the wall to help kids to scaffold their learning. Look at this one for math. And you're going to get all these slides, by the way. Here are all these common mistakes, there, and there. You're, and it's, and all these things that keep kids having a prompt on the wall. And this is the last one, is a so-called worked problem, where every stage of the problem is displayed. It's going to actually look up and see the scaffolding of, okay, so that's the step where I got it wrong. I forgot to multiply, or I forgot to bring down, so with long division. So again, with phase 1, and this is the preparation before teaching, the key success factors are, first of all, good templates like, UBD, understanding by design template for unit planning, and good lesson planning templates so that the key ingredients are always there. Sharing work with colleagues, because once you've invented a good unit plan or lesson plan, that's money in the bank. It can be shared with colleagues, used on the internet and so forth. But the third critical thing is knowing when to stop, not staying up all night, conserving your energy. And this gal here is having a little bit of a problem with that, okay? So that's the first phase, unit and lesson planning. The second phase is actual teaching. And you recognize this scene here from this movie about a very dynamic teacher? Wonderful, wonderful movie about a super dynamic teacher. So that's a little extreme. So again, for tier 1 teaching, actually in the classroom teaching, classroom management is critically important. Knowing the kids, being culturally sensitive, making the content clear, making it exciting and relevant, having a sense of humor, using teachable moments. Those are all just the basics of really good teaching. But that's not enough. There's got to be checking for understanding. And this is, the research is showing us, this is one of the biggest things that good teachers have always done. They teach effectively, but then they check in the middle of the lesson. And they make on-the-spot decisions about whether to abandon the lesson, reteach it, have the kids turn and talk, move on, extend it, completely start all over again. That getting that check for understanding is a critical ingredient. And this is Dylan William, a British researcher. It's a very wise words here. When a teacher teaches, no matter how well he or she might design a lesson, what a child learns is unpredictable. Children do not always learn what we teach. That is why the most important assessment does not happen at the end of learning. It happens during the learning when there is still time to do something with the information. So that's the so-called formative or on-the-spot assessments. And fixing learning problems in real time. And you can see this teacher is just moving around this room, checking in with kids constantly. I was in a classroom in New Jersey a few years ago. This is the 5th bullet down here. And the teacher explained something, and then she said, now I'm going to cruise around on the convertible. And she got onto a little stool she had with wheels, and she scooted around the room doing exactly what you see this woman doing, of checking in with kids, getting kids helping each other, buddy help. Of course, sometimes tossing the lesson plan because it just isn't going well. Following up on errors and misconceptions, that's the heart of, and this, when you think about it, is really differentiation, is tuning it to individual kids on the spot in real time. And if you're at the back of a room watching a lesson, so this teacher looks dynamic, looks effective, and if we look at it critically, is she being skillful at getting the kids to do the heavy lifting? That's the real skill of good teaching, and it looks like in this case she is. So the critical success factors with phase 2 is energetic and sensitive lesson execution, checking for understanding and following up, of course, getting a culture and a climate in the classroom where kids can work independently. And that's a classroom management issue, where they're comfortable asking for help. They don't feel stupid by asking for help, and they're willing to help each other. When you get that kind of climate and culture in a classroom, the teacher's not doing too much for students. They're doing a lot themselves, and the teacher is orchestrating, I love this phrase, productive struggle. Okay, so the kids are doing the lifting because that's what's really building their skills. So we talked about unit and lesson planning, not too much, but getting a good UDL lesson going, deliberative instruction, dynamic, thoughtful, nimble instruction. And then the last thing is follow-up, because guess what? No matter how well we teach, there's still going to be some kids who may still have some learning issues. So this photo here shows the principal is on the right-hand side, is dropped in on a teacher team meeting, and they're looking at data from an assessment that they all gave together. And they're deciding what's the appropriate follow-up. How can we as a team get these kids who haven't got it yet? And how can we improve our teaching? So I like to talk about the moment of truth in a classroom. So a teacher teaches a unit, for example, a unit on World War II, and does an assessment. And here's what the assessment shows. 4 kids got it, level 4, knocked it out of the park, highly effective. Level 3, we got about 12 kids there who are solid, they got it. Not outstanding, but solid. And then the level 2 there is kids who are right on the borderline, just barely squeak by. And then the level 1 is the kids who failed. So this is a very common outcome in most instruction. It's a bell-shaped curve, okay? Most of the kids got it, but some of them didn't. And if the teacher, what usually happens next? What generally happens next? And a lot of you are thinking the teacher moves on because they've got to cover the curriculum, the regents are coming up, we got these exams and so forth. But if this teacher moves on with those kids at level 2 and 1, what happens to those kids? They fall further behind because they don't have the prerequisite skills. So this is the moment of truth, because this is when something has to happen. And the crucial success factors here are common planning time for same grade, same subject teams. And I know all of you working in schools, we don't have common planning time now, but when we're back in school, hopefully in a few weeks or in the fall, having a schedule that has same grade, same subject teams meeting together at least once a week, having a trusting climate, looking at student assessments, analyzing what's working and what's not working, thinking about our teaching. What is it? And Zachary, why are your kids doing better at this? What are you doing? Share that with us. Honestly, assessing our own teacher. My kids blew it on that one. I got to change my methods. And of course, following up with struggling students. So the long-term goal here, and this is one more element here, and we're almost finished, is building student independence and self-reliance. So this has got to be in every school district from K to 12. Has got to think about how can we take kids from preschool and kindergarten, where they're very dependent on us, and by the time they graduate from high school, they're independent, so that they can go to the workplace, go to community college, go to the military, and be independent learners. And so too many of us as educators are helpful people, and we do too much for kids. We'll call it dysfunctional rescuing. And so students must be able and willing to self-assess. Again, this is by high school, but increasingly through the grades, take responsibility for their own learning, understand their strengths and weaknesses. I'm not so good at this. I need to work on this. Shift to a growth mindset. I can get better at that by hard work and application and getting help. Deal with difficulty, frustration, and failure, not go to pieces. Know the best study skills. And the retrieval effect is something, by the way, was in last week's Marshall Memo, a really great article by Pooja Agarwal about the retrieval effect, about the study skill of testing yourself. And then it really helps to be passionate about a couple of topics. That, I think, is one of the meta goals of schools, is to have kids really learn a lot about one subject that they're passionate about. So take a look, I won't read this, take a look at this third grade lesson in the traditional mode and in the differentiated mode. Just check out the way this lesson changed. So again, look at the way this lesson is good, it's fine, but the differentiated lesson is so much more powerful in terms of, of really getting kids involved, invested, and so forth, and really coming to probably better outcomes. And here's a high school history lesson, again, traditional versus differentiated. So these two classrooms look radically different. And you can bet that the kids in the second classroom walk out of there with something they really can remember. Hopefully they all share each other's learning and insights. So let me just sum up here, and then maybe we can have some final questions. Basically, the key question is, what should students be learning? We got to get kids at fourth grade to be learning the right stuff, right rigor level. Are these the best learning experiences? Again, having that lens of, is this the right time for this movie? Is this the right time for this visiting speaker? And then the big question is all students learning. And that means constant assessment that's visible, whether it's exit tickets or checks for understanding or clickers or plickers or some way of checking in with the whole class, not just the eager beavers who raise their hand. And so again, balancing the teacher's energy between these three things so they don't exhaust themselves. The front loading. Okay, the planning, thinking it through, backwards design, good UDL lessons. The execution, being nimble and all around that classroom, constantly checking for understanding and fixing learning problems in real time. And then that follow-up, ideally done by teacher teams, supervised by the principal, but mostly by teacher teams looking at common assessment results. And again, this is hard work. But I think it's much more effective work that fuels teachers' energy, efficacy, and long-term passion for the mission. I think that's the right kind of work that will make a real difference in the end. So I hope, in conclusion, I've convinced you that, first of all, to focus less on the content process product model and more on what students are supposed to be learning and whether they have actually learned it. Focus less on differentiation and more on orchestrating a wide variety of learning experiences that are appropriate to the content being taught. And then wisely dividing time and energy among effective front loading, teaching for understanding, and a long-range goal of getting all students to be independent, self-differentiated learners. So that's it. So I would love to see if there are any questions, comments, pushback, thoughts on what I've just motored through in the last hour.
I don't have any questions in the chat right now, Kim, but if you're open to it, I could put your email address in the chat. And for anything that comes up later, they could
Sure.
send you an email and ask for further clarification. I know we have a legal workshop coming up shortly.
Right.
So I really thank you for being here today, and I thank you for joining us. As I have my attorney, Jay Warona and Beth Harris coming into the room. I welcome them, and I really thank you, Kim, for your time, for your expertise. This was tremendously helpful for me, and I always love when we can go back to thinking about the best practices in teaching and learning. So I really appreciate that. And Kim, if it's okay with you, I'll put your email address in the chat as well for anyone who has any existing questions.
Yeah, please do. One other thing is that I did write an article for Kaplan with some of the same content of today, less developed in some ways and less visuals, of course. But that's on my website, marshallmemo.com. Just click on Kim's published writing on the left and scroll down and you'll see that article. And then Jackie, I think you're going to give the slides for this presentation to people.
Yes, actually I've put them in the chat a couple times, but if anybody did not get those, please let me know. Happy to share them again. Again, you can always email me at jlevine@pnwboces.org. Would be happy to send anything from our workshop today or any of our PL on the goes or additional PL on the go information you might have.
Great, terrific. Okay, well, thank you. I hope this has been helpful, and I'm happy to respond to any emails or even do a phone call if people want.
Thank you so much, Kim. It's been a great pleasure working with you so far, and thank you again for offering your time today.
My pleasure. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
You too. Bye now.